Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast with me, Erin Giesemann Rabke, and my husband, Carl Rabke. Embodiment Matters is an ongoing, rich conversation about what it really means to be embodied and why and how embodiment matters so much in our daily lives and in our modern world. You can find out more about our wonderful guests, about our work. You can sign up for our newsletter and find out how to become a supporting member of our podcast online at embodimentmatters.com. Hello, friends. I am so thrilled to be able to share this recent conversation with the incredible Cynthia Jurs with you. And before sharing her official bio and a little bit about what we talk about in this conversation, I want to tell you that I find Cynthia to be one of the most moving human beings I have met in a very long time. Her humility, her wisdom, her vision, her bone-deep dedication to healing the earth and fostering awakening in herself and others is truly awe-inspiring. I adore her so much, it's kind of painful. Carl and I have had the good fortune to learn and practice with her over this past year, and it has been such a timely gift. Cynthia is a Lama in the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition and a Dharmacharya in the order of Interbeing of Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. In 1990, she made a life-changing pilgrimage to meet a 106-year-old hermit and meditation master living in a cave in Nepal, from whom she received the practice of the Earth Treasure Vases. She's the guiding teacher of the Gaia Mandala Sangha in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she teaches a unique blend of engaged Buddhism and sacred activism in response to the call of the earth. Her nonprofit, Alliance for the Earth, is dedicated to facilitating a global community committed to planetary healing and collective awakening through the Earth Treasure Vase Global Healing Project. She has partnered with indigenous elders and young activists around the world, and for 10 years has carried out a peace-building program in Liberia, West Africa. She's currently at work on a book, which we cannot wait to read, and a film, both entitled Summoned by the Earth. In our conversation, you'll hear Cynthia tell the story of meeting this 106-year-old Lama and about the consequences that she's still living out today, many years later. We talk about sacred activism, subtle activism, engaged Buddhism, and this incredible project of burying sacred earth treasure vases, these little clay vessels filled with prayers for healing I believe they're on every continent around the globe. She shares about where she's drawn strength to continue to persevere in her dedication and her practice. Oh, it's such a great conversation. We talked about so many things and could have gone on for so many more hours. We talked about collective awakening and Thich Nhat Hanh's prediction that the future Buddha will not be a human being, but rather a Sangha, a community of beings awakening together. So many more juicy topics, from the practice of listening to the earth, the distinction between belief and faith, the potent teachings in the breath, and experiencing Gaia in our own bodies and minds. Cynthia shares a passionate invitation to not close our eyes before suffering, but to stay awake and engaged with what's happening in our world. She also shares a little bit about an incredible practice she's brought forth that's called Tara Gaia. Carl and I have both been lucky enough to be at the first 2 transmissions of Cynthia offering this incredible practice. And at the end of our conversation, she shares a gorgeous prayer about taking refuge in the earth as the embodiment of teacher, teachings, and community. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as we did. A few links, and you can find these in our show notes too if you have questions about spelling. Cynthia's website is GaiaMandala.net. I'll spell it the first time, GaiaMandala mandala.net. The monthly newsletter is gaiamandala.net/contact-us, where you can learn all about her offerings, including full moon meditation. There's more about the Earth Treasure Vase meditation and a link to register for the Tara Gaia teachings coming up this fall. And you can find all of that in our show notes at embodimentmatters.com/podcast. And again, a special thank you to those of you who are donating to support us in our endeavor to bring these wonderful, wise conversations forward and share them widely. We're so grateful for you. If you'd like to join in that effort at just $2 a month, you can find out more at embodimentmatters.com/podcast. And without further ado, I hope you enjoy this wonderful conversation with this incredible human being. Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast, Cynthia. We are so thrilled to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I wanted to start today just asking you, how you're doing during these strange pandemic times, and also sort of how you're relating to it.
It's a very big it.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been doing actually really well, given the fact that I am so lucky and grateful to be able to offer a number of meditations and conversations like this into the public arena and work with people who are, struggling. I think we're all struggling with staying afloat, keeping our center, grappling with our distress and, the uncertainty of the things that we're living with as the world around us unravels in so many ways. Mm-hmm. So the practices of meditation and sacred activism that I teach are very helpful for meeting the moment. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I'm very, very grateful to be able to offer what I can. And, I find for myself that I'm, on a roller coaster a bit. Some days are easier than others. The collective experience is filled with a lot of anxiety, and I feel that very deeply. Mm-hmm. And the earth, who is my source of refuge, really, from the spiritual perspective, is speaking very, very loudly, and has been for a long time. But I hear her. I feel what's happening to the body of the earth around us and in us, and try to stay in a place of oh gosh, I don't even know what the word is, but in balance, not to go too far into the despair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cynthia, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about sacred activism, because and the connection with meditation, because it seems like in some contexts of meditation or in certain Buddhist lineages, there's not so much emphasis on the care for the relative world, samsara, and, mm-hmm. and how those two meet. And I know that you've studied with Thich, Hanh, who was very deeply connected with meditation practice and activism together. And I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. That's a great question. Thich Nhat Hanh being one of my root teachers, the thing that got me about him early on, a long time ago in the 80s, was his notion of engaged Buddhism. Mm-hmm. And the idea that, it's all very well and good to have our spiritual practice, which is important, but it's also important to do something with it and to contribute. And this is part of the Bodhisattva vow, the vow of awakening hearts and minds to our interconnectedness with each other and with all of life. And so once we start to realize that connection, we realize that we're all in this together, and that what I do affects you and what you do affects me, and that we need to engage with each other and with the earth to bring about the balance and the harmony and the healing and protection that is called for in these times. So engaged Buddhism is one way of defining what we can also call sacred activism. And the practice that I've been doing for so long, that I received from a 106-year-old Lama living in a cave in Nepal back in 1990, when I asked him, what can we do to bring healing and protection to the earth? He gave me this practice of the Earth Treasure Vases, or vases, and they are to be filled with prayers and offerings symbolic of bringing healing and protection to the earth, these little clay pots. And so that practice has taken me all around the world, connecting with, indigenous elders, young activists, regular folks in all kinds of places where healing and protection is called for in a variety of ways. And so that practice, it really taught me about sacred activism. My friend David Nickel, who I teach with a lot, has written a book on subtle activism, which is more the practice of directing our meditations and our prayers in particular directions, knowing that what we focus on is eventually what manifests. But the treasure vase practice makes us go out into places where there is conflict or environmental destruction, or, all kinds of innumerable things that are creating suffering in the world. And we have to get our fingernails dirty, because we have to actually find a place and dig a hole in the earth and place this little clay pot filled with all of our greatest hopes and prayers and offerings and intentions into the ground like a seed. And it gets planted that way. And then things start happening. And some of them are more subtle, some of them are more intangible, and some of them are quite tangible, depending on how deeply humans get involved in engaging with their deepest wishes and most potent loves in this life, what we care about and what motivates us to help. So, sacred activism to me is like that. It's where the rubber meets the road. And but it's not about a political agenda particularly. Not that marching in the streets or getting involved and rolling up our sleeves with all of the normal kinds of activism we could be involved with is not important. But this level of the spiritual dimension, the intention that we bring based on our practice of awakening, then directing that in these kinds of ways. I don't know if I'm making sense. Am I making sense?
Oh, making complete sense. Yeah.
I was so hoping you would tell the story of meeting the Lama in the cave. And also, maybe, I don't know if you want to unpack that a little bit more, but I know you've said you've given everything to make this happen, the Earth Treasure Vases. And for people who aren't familiar with this, I don't know if you want to take time to read. It's so powerful to hear you and David read the list of places treasure vases are buried. But any stories you want to tell about that, I think, are so touching and beautiful.
Thank you, Erin. It's a long list to read. There are close to 70, there will be 70 Earth Treasure Vases buried around the world to create this kind of global mandala that I like to imagine, filled with all of our prayers and intentions. So we invoke all of those locations every full moon when we do a meditation that's connected to this practice. And I've been doing that meditation for over 30 years now, and it is very alive. So just to back up a minute, I had this opportunity. I was already involved with Buddhist practice through Thich Nhat Hanh, and also through the Tibetan, some of the Tibetan teachers that I had already met. But in 1990, I had the chance to go to Nepal to meet this old wise man in the cave. And I didn't quite realize what I was getting myself into when I went on this pilgrimage, but I knew I had to go. And I was walking up the path of the highest mountains in the world, huffing and puffing, and I suddenly realized I have an incredible opportunity here to ask a question of this old Lama, that would benefit not just me, but others who aren't so lucky to have such an experience, such an opportunity. And so I pondered deeply what that question might be, because I didn't really quite know at that point what my question was. What came to me was, what can we do to bring healing and protection to the earth? And at the time, I still do live in New Mexico. I live near Santa Fe, across the Rio Grande Valley from the Los Alamos National Laboratory, which is the birthplace of the atomic bomb. And there were things happening at that time around the disposal of radioactive waste that had never been dealt with since the bomb was created and continuing to be developed. And Joanna Macy is one of my great mentors in this life, and she was talking at the time about nuclear guardianship, and it was a real wake-up call to me. And it was partly that was on my mind and in my heart as I was walking up the trail, because we had just lost a battle with what's it called? The agency, I'm forgetting the name of the agency that was in charge of all of this, but they were putting us through our emotions, allowing us to speak out, but then just, not really listening. And so the effects of radioactive waste on all of the ecosystems and the web of life for literally hundreds of thousands of years were so shocking and so devastating. It was like that. Like, what do we do to bring healing and protection to the earth in the face of these kinds of things? Not to mention climate change that is taking place today and everything else that is, unraveling before our very eyes. So that was what was motivating me. And I lived with him for several weeks, and eventually the time came where I could ask him. And he said to me that even just one person practicing deeply will bring benefit to the whole area around where they live. And then he said, but you need to get these Earth Treasure Vases and you need to put them in the ground, and they will do that work. And my rational mind didn't understand or believe what he was saying. Like, how could a little clay pot filled with prayers and symbolic offerings affect these kinds of changes? But the other part of me thought, well, okay, this is what's coming to me, and we have to try everything, and we have to do it on every level. And who's to say, how it's going to happen? Where can I get some? And so anyway, we traveled on from there to another monastery where the Lama who made them lived. And the lamas were very sensitive to the depth of the question that I was holding and the demand of the earth in these times, and ended up gathering relics and medicines from all of the lineages of Tibetan Buddhism to mix into the clay and to empower the pots in a very unusual way, so that they would be extremely potent, and they are, and then they gave them to us to fill and seal and bury. Normally that activity would be carried out by the lamas themselves in very particular ways behind the closed doors of the monastery, sort of, and then maybe we would get one to take somewhere. But in our case, they were left open because they were already imbued with this, potent medicine. And then I was told to just put them in the ground and they'll do the work. And I, again, couldn't believe it was sort of that easy, but, and it's not been very easy, but we began to fill them ourselves in our own way. And it brought the practice alive in these times, like it never would have come alive, I don't think, if we hadn't been given them in this way. So no matter where we go, in what culture or tradition we find ourselves, we bring these little open vessels for people to make their own offerings that are meaningful to them for the locations where they are and what's going on there. And you'd be so amazed at the things that have been offered and the beautiful prayers and offerings that have been given. And then all that, it's like the little vase comes alive in our hands, filled with all of this deep intention and what we love and care about so much. And then that is what is planted in the ground. And as I say, it's like a seed. And so that's kind of an overview. We've taken them all over the world. There's a map on a couple of websites that maybe you can link to, and again, we do the practice and invoke all the locations every full moon to keep it alive. And there are still treasure vases in the process of going out through others now. I'm teaching the practice to people who want to steward the vase themselves, and and like that. But just to pick up on one other little thread that you mentioned, Erin, was that it has taken everything. And it has, it has been a huge assignment for me. A global healing practice means addressing not just my own backyard, but the whole earth, and making relations with elders and activists and regular people all over the world. And so at first I was lucky to have the resources that could allow me to do that. But eventually, I had to start asking for help. I couldn't do it all alone. And I was very overwhelmed in the beginning. In fact, the vases stayed in their trunk for quite a few years while I prepared myself to take this on. And then the forest fires and the droughts and the various things that were taking place around this region and also everywhere in the world began to, scream very loudly. And it was like, okay, well, we have these, we need to start working with them. I was waiting for some Lama to come along to tell me what to do it for me, or some elder who was going to, take it where it needed to go. And finally it was clear, like, we have to do this ourselves. We know enough. We can see enough what's happening. We have to just offer from our hearts everything we can and give everything. Because this is a matter of, honestly, it's a matter of life and death, right?
Yeah.
So, so that, yeah.
It's just such a powerful story. And I think of just imagining the beginning 30 years ago with one vase and this wondering, is this going to do anything? And it's so, I feel weepy right now, as often happens to me when I'm with you. Just this awe at what following the thread has created, really this global mandala of these healing vases, and the way just it's so beautiful, as you say, inviting other cultures to participate in each our own way,
Mm-hmm.
just so inspiring. I would love to ask, where have you found the strength to keep going with this? Because I know it's not easy. And probably some people don't understand, when you talk about sacred activism versus, something that is more tangibly, at the level of voting or something like that. It's a huge act of faith, and I'm so touched by that, and just wonder, what are you drawing on?
Mm. Sometimes I wonder that myself.
Mm-hmm.
This practice has connected me with something so much larger than myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had to learn how to get out of my own way.
Mm-hmm.
And to really call on, one way of saying it would be the forces of nature.
Mm-hmm.
All of those who have gone before, the ancestors, elders, lineage masters,
Mm-hmm.
Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, if you happen to be connected to the Buddhist tradition. And many of them are either hidden because they're just regular folks, or they are not visible in our ordinary way of seeing things.
Mm-hmm.
But there's such a much larger reality. And it's kind of like tapping into that.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that I myself am just a vessel or a vehicle for something so much larger.
Mm-hmm.
And aligning with that through my intention to be of benefit, to bring healing to the earth, to answer the call of Gaia, to work with everything I've got for the collective awakening that is upon us now. And I really feel that we're in the midst of, in Buddhism, we know that there have been several what we call turnings of the wheel of the Dharma over the centuries since the Buddha first awakened. And over time, as the teachings have deepened into different cultures and experiences in the practice of the Dharma, the understanding of the Dharma, we find ourselves in a time now, I think, where there's a kind of fourth turning of the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
where we're realizing two things. And that is that it's not going to be one person, one individual who is going to awaken and take us where we need to go. We're all in this together, and it's a collective awakening that is being ignited in us. Those of us who are paying attention, are realizing we're all in this together. And so what is that? That is really interesting. It's never happened before. The other thing that is part of this fourth turning of the wheel is listening to the earth, because this is our only home. We are part of the earth herself. We are an intimate part of the web of life, each in our own way. And so is every tree, every rock, every animal, every flower, every river, everything that is here as part of the web of life is an important expression and element of wholeness that we are so blessed and lucky to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't survive and live without.
Mm-hmm.
So listening to what Mother Nature is saying to us
Mm-hmm.
and responding to that call is part of taking our spiritual practice out of being in relationship to gurus and teachers. Bless them all. They've given us incredible teachings.
Mm-hmm.
But those days, I feel, are over.
Mm-hmm.
The days that we're living in now, the time that we're in, is asking for something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So that's kind of where I go with all of this. And that's what keeps me going. And it is a matter of faith, but not a matter of belief.
Mm.
Because belief asks us to believe in something outside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And faith is something that when we stop and take a breath and drop into a place of being,
Mm-hmm.
instead of doing, and we allow our awareness to open, there's an experience there of something, as I say, so much larger than ourselves, that is, for me, expressed so beautifully in the web of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I have great faith in that.
Mm-hmm.
I have faith in it in you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have faith in it in myself, even in my moments of doubt,
You always make me cry, Cynthia.
Well, that's good. The Tibetans and the Native Americans that I've been with, the elders always say, you've got to pray so hard that you really feel it, like you weep.
Yeah. I'm feeling it. I'm just reminded of this quote about hope not being the conviction that something's going to turn out in a particular way, but that it's worth doing regardless. And you embody that in just such a beautiful way, in so many ways. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it's certainly a line of inquiry that we love looking at, for so long, these traditions being held by a guru or some kind of container to take people deeply. And then how can that container be held in a way where it's not one being and still have people accessing something? Because it seems like there's so much horizontal kind of information for people. You can take any class on Sounds True, and like, what's something that can carry people deeply into intimacy and unfolding without having the rigidities of those guru containers.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I love what happens in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And when I teach, I really try to create a container that allows everyone's voice to be heard, because we each have Buddha nature. We each have wisdom and insight that is unique to us, but is just another facet of the whole, Mm-hmm. And we learn so much from each other. This is like when we talk about the Sangha, in Buddhism, the community that practices together. We're on this, we've made this commitment to enter into a path of awakening and cultivate our own process of transformation, which is not always easy. And then to also recognize our place within the larger collective experience. And so the group becomes very important in that collective experience to be part of, and to really listen to the wisdom that emerges from the group, and not just from the one person holding forth on their high throne, their seat, their pedestal. And there have been so many examples, of teachers who get the big head, as my husband says, and who think they know everything, and even the traditions that have great wisdom, who we love and appreciate and value and respect, things change. And the system that upholds the power structure that upholds those systems is very outdated, honestly.
Yeah.
And the power that is then given to or projected onto teachers. And we see it even in, of course, not even, but vividly in the political arena and the patriarchal structure, the hierarchical structure that has been in operation for such a long time, that is, killing us.
Yeah.
So, it's time for a new system. It's time for a new model. And there's incredible jewels, available within the group. Charles Eisenstein, I can't remember if I shared this with you all, but Charles Eisenstein, who's a great friend and wonderful teacher, did an exercise once having to do with what he called the group. And it was like, instead of the guru, going to the old wise man in the cave, the guru asking a question, gathering a little group and then asking the same question to each of the 3 or 4 people in the group, and getting, each one of the answers creates then the whole of it.
Right. I think that's so inspiring. We were having some good porch conversations with friends about this, and the shift from even that kind of dialogue where everyone can bring their own perspective, and the sort of ego relaxation that has to happen, that it's not about one person being right, but having a more nuanced perspective from each person's different perspective. And I know you have shared the story of being with Thich Nhat Hanh the first time he said, the future Buddha will not be a Buddha, but a Sangha. And especially for people who aren't familiar with Buddhist lingo and mythology, you were already talking about that, but would you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, it was such an incredible moment. This was back in the early 90s at Plum Village, his community in France, where he went after he was exiled from Vietnam. And he kind of made this pronouncement, really, although it was just in the course of his teachings that day. He was talking about, what he said exactly was that the next Buddha will be a Sangha. And we all kind of, like, there was a sort of hushed breath, that passed through everyone. And I don't think we even really knew what he was talking about. There's a teaching in Buddhism about Maitreya Buddha being the next Buddha, the Buddha of the future that will come. And he was saying, no, actually, that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that the Sangha is awakening. The community is awakening. And that means that we're all waking up together, right? And so cultivating the practice of meditation, looking deeply into our own reactive patterns and ways in which we get so caught going around and around and around in what we call cyclic existence, never getting anywhere, just creating more and more suffering all the time for ourselves and others. That's the practice, is to look at that, see it for what it is, experience it completely, so that it no longer has its hold on us and we can be free or liberated. And when that liberation takes place, and it does slowly for each of us, we then have more and more access to our own awakened nature. And that nature is what we are then practicing to embody. And so each of us in our own way is being asked to do that work, and then to rest in that experience, that embodied experience of being Buddha, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Buddha just means awakened one.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a quality, this awakened quality that each of us has.
Mm-hmm.
It's our own nature. It's not something outside of us that we have to believe in.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we have to peel the layers back to get at.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get at it. It's not so, esoteric, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's available in every moment, actually. And so that becomes the practice. And I love the story of when the Buddha was awakened, because what happened in that moment is that the Buddha was being, kind of pestered in a very big way by all those aspects of his own nature that were, getting in the way of this awakening, the reactive patterns, the attachments, and the details of, all of our thoughts and notions of what it means to be human and all of that shit. But he knew that he was on the verge of something, of seeing something. And he was beginning to glimpse this whole other reality, this way of being that is intimately connected and so vastly bigger than what we think we are. And in that moment, what did he do? But he touched the earth and summoned the earth to witness this awakening, calling on that source of life that is, again, so much bigger than ourselves. This earth goddess who is filled with, everything we need, and who is there always. That is the source that he called upon. So I take that to heart. And I feel as if all of this is tied up in what Thich Nhat Hanh was pointing to.
Yeah, and it seems so essential, going back to what you mentioned before about how, the earth, she's speaking to us in so many ways now, and how essential it is for everyone to, everyone's voice in the circle to come forward with that. And then there's a question that comes too, like, say there's a listener out there who says, I have no idea how she's speaking to me or if she's speaking to me. How would you respond to that?
Earth?
Yeah. Like, I don't know how to listen to her.
Yeah. Well, the first step is to stop. Stop for, a moment at least, and take a breath and try to come back to the present moment, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, which is in fact the only moment, because this is where life happens. Life doesn't happen in the future or the past. Life happens in the present moment. And we're so busy, so caught up, so disconnected that we don't even know what is here in the present moment. What we don't even know what we're feeling or thinking or what's calling us, because we're on this, treadmill. And so the practice of meditation is a way of stopping. And the breath is an incredible tool that we have available to us in every moment, because it's, it's right here. And the breath actually is one of the ways that we can connect very intimately with her, with Gaia, with the web of life, because that is the life force energy that is moving through us, and all life is the breath. And so the breath is a very sacred thing. It's called prana, or that life force energy. So we can reconnect with the voice of Gaia in us, in our own breath. And when we come back to ourselves, sometimes it's been so long that again, we might cry, we might go, oh my God, where have I been all this time, you know? And then it's finding our seat, taking a little time out to cultivate this connection with ourselves, with the earth, and with each other, and finding the people around us who can support us in looking deeply. And maybe it won't come immediately, or maybe there's this little quiet voice, you know. Andrew Harvey, the author and speaker and writer and teacher, he wrote a book called The Hope, actually, that is kind of all about sacred activism. And he says, you know, what is it that gets you up at 3 o'clock in the morning that you care about most deeply? Mm-hmm. That's the thing that you need to anchor your life around. You know, what do you care about? Mm-hmm. What do you love? And it's that voice in us that is what connects us to Mother Earth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What connects us to the life force energy that we are part of, that is our creative offering mm-hmm. to each other and to restoring the balance in our world. Mm-hmm. So that's one way. That is one way. And, you know, it's actually a very simple way. Mm-hmm. I always invite people to go out, find a spot in nature, whether it's in your own garden or in an empty lot in the city you live in, you know, or go to the beach, or, you know, some overlook that is, you know, a wider view. Mm-hmm. You know, go for a hike. I mean, there's so many different ways. And then find a spot and be there and like begin to call it your own, you know, like your place that you go back to make that connection. Mm-hmm. Sometimes making an offering is a way to connect. You know, you offer a flower, you offer some of your nuts and seeds and raisins, you know, to the beings of that place. You pour a little water or some kind of a libation on the ground and give thanks. Mm-hmm. You know, that giving of thanks and gratitude for this life, even if it's hard, you know, takes us out of ourselves and the worries and the concerns and brings us into another kind of experience. That once we start to make an offering like that, we realize how hungry Mother Earth is for our appreciation and respect, how we've ignored her, you know.
I just have about 43 questions in response to this. What's right at the fore right now is just appreciating, you know, the simplicity of that kind of practice. And it's not expensive or hard, and how it changes everything, you know. It's just profound. And I want to circle back to when we were talking about the future Buddha as Sangha or community. And in the telling of that story, I was just loving the language of nature, Buddha nature, and your particular way of standing for, you know, nature, Gaia, as Buddha, as a deity, which I know is not the common view in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition we all share roots in. And I love, I don't know if you're comfortable to share this, but your teachings about refuge and the refuge prayer that is so unique about how we find refuge in this congruence of nature and our own awakened nature. I don't know if that brings anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So for me, I kind of went on a journey from the traditional view of refuge in Buddhism as being refuge in the Buddha or the guru, the teacher, the Dharma, which is the teachings, and the Sangha, which is the community that practices those teachings. To seeing those three jewels, as they're called, those refuges, embodied in the earth herself as a living being, as a living embodiment of the teachings, the teacher, and the community. Because you can see that in all the ways in which the ecosystems of the world are interdependently connected in this amazing, vast system that we can barely wrap our minds around, right? And the beauty of the expression of nature is just mind-blowing. And then, you just look into your own body and the workings of the miraculous workings of the way that the body operates, and so on every level, from the microcosm to the macrocosm, out into the stars of the cosmos and the whole entire universe, there is this amazing experience of awareness that expresses the teachings of the Dharma, the interdependent community of life on Earth, and our place in it, and this incredible teacher, Gaia. So that is now how I express the refuge verses, and I have written based on some of Thich Nhat Hanh's, the way that Thich Nhat Hanh has expressed refuge, but his is still connected to the Buddha Dharma Sangha. I've rewritten that to be an expression of the earth and our opportunity to take refuge in the earth as an expression of all of this. So I'm happy to share that with you and your listeners if you'd like to post it or something like that, Erin.
Yeah.
And what has also arisen for me in the course of my own spiritual life experience, I have been very connected to Tara as a deity practice from the Tibetan tradition since the very beginning. And again, just to clarify that when we talk about deities, we are really actually only pointing to an aspect of our own enlightened nature that is given, it's like a personification of that nature, which we also have if we wake up to it. And so in the Tibetan tradition, we imagine that quality in different ways. And so we have different deities that embody those qualities. And Tara is considered such a deity of awakened compassion in action, usually, because green Tara is related to the quality of awakened action, when it goes into action. So anyway, I have worked with Tara for many, many years, and in the course of carrying out the Earth Treasure Vase practice all around the world, especially when I got to Africa, which was so challenging, the experiences that I had in Liberia, a very terribly difficult part of the world from war, Congo, a place that is also, just very conflicted, and a whole history there. Those places in particular were very challenging for me, and, really helped a lot to bring this practice to life. But anyway, I digress from what I was going to say, which is that when I was in the midst of all of that, I started to have this feeling like I really wanted to have a personal connection to Gaia, and I guess I already did, but because I was imagining Tara all the time, I was actually asking Tara to you know, connect me with Gaia as a deity in the same sense. And eventually that began to happen. And it was kind of a surprise because I really, it was not something like I made up or created, but this began to, this practice began to evolve. And a mantra came to me first of Gaia. And it was so powerful because that mantra, when you recite a mantra, when one recites a mantra, the sound really connects you to an energy that is what you're trying to invoke. And it took me into this experience, and then she began to appear in form. And so I now teach a practice of Tara Gaia that is a visualization that is very much coming out of how we do this kind of practice in the Tibetan tradition with the mantra. And yet it's a new practice. It's a practice of Tara Gaia. It's really a practice of Gaia that is another way that people can access a relationship, form a relationship to her as a goddess, and to awaken to that that nature of the feminine that is also such a big part of what we're reclaiming in these times, to bring balance to that whole patriarchal system and to find the council circle in a way that is, open and available in a much more feminine way. So Tara Gaia is part of the source of refuge that I look to now too.
And we have both been so grateful to have received that teaching from you and worked with that practice, which is just, I don't even have words. It's so powerful. And I so appreciate your courage in sharing that. I wanted to ask about, I actually was talking about Andrew Harvey and Joanna Macy in a class I was teaching last night. And since you brought him, I was sharing this story that we heard him speak, I don't know, a number of years ago when he was in Utah. And he was talking about, the Joseph Campbell saying and piece of wisdom that was very popular for a time of follow your bliss. And, when Andrew Harvey gets going, he's like almost like a revival preacher. He was passionate and fierce up on stage, and he said, look where that took us. You need to follow your heartbreak. And I was saying how instead of just following your bliss, what breaks your heart, and follow that. And I was sharing that I so appreciate in the work of Joanna Macy, which I also adore and teach, you include both. And, the importance of, and you've mentioned both of these, what you love, and also letting your heart break about what we see is off in the world. And I just wonder if you have anything to reflect about both of those, the sort of drawing nourishment from what we love and also our loving intentions for the world, and also letting our hearts break, but as you mentioned in the beginning, not falling into despair.
Wonderful, Erin. Yeah.
Big topic.
It is. And it connects with something, Carl, you mentioned early on in the conversation, having to do with sacred activism and the relative experience, which is so often overlooked in some of our spiritual traditions. And I wanted to touch on that as well. But one of the things that comes in response to what you're saying, Erin, is that so much of what we love nowadays is so heartbreaking. Like, it didn't used to be that all the trees were gone or the water was polluted to such an extent that it's unrecoverable for, who knows how long, and things like that. Not to mention, people dying from a pandemic and oh gosh, everything else that's going on. But it's heartbreaking to turn our awareness to things that are what we love so much and know that everything is impermanent, that we humans especially create so much more suffering for ourselves and the world than is necessary. Mm-hmm. And we want to focus on what we love, what's so beautiful, what is going to create bliss for ourselves. And we do that at the expense of what's not working, Mm-hmm. We do that, we want to deny the presence, and it's very evident now in our culture, mm-hmm. Of the pain and suffering of the world. Like it's not happening, mm-hmm. And just pretend as if it's not happening. Buddhism, another, powerful thing about the teachings of Buddhism really does invite us to go into the suffering, to, not in a morbid way, but to not turn as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, do not close your eyes before suffering. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to wake up, if we want to heal the world, if we want to heal anything, like just even some little wound on our leg, we have to admit that it's there and we have to treat it. Mm-hmm. And so the two go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, I'm kind of rambling around all of this, but we have to be willing to face the suffering in order to in these times, restore the beauty mm-hmm. of life on earth, restore what brings us bliss. And we can't really, and this is, I guess, where I would go back to this question about the relative truth and the absolute truth, is in these times, it is not appropriate to go up and live in our cave, mm-hmm. right. and focus on our high spiritual experiences at the expense of, let's say, racism, mm-hmm. or pandemics, or the things that are occurring, climate change. Mm-hmm. These things are affecting even the highest caves in the world. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are, we each have our own nature. So some people's nature is to be much more focused internally, mm-hmm. and contributing to the relieving the suffering of the world through their meditation practice. Mm-hmm. But just doing it for ourselves, mm-hmm. is not helpful. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'll speak for myself, because I have been told by various lamas, that we need to practice our meditation until we have this awakening, enlightenment experience, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then we can help people, then we can be of benefit. Mm-hmm. And really it's like, don't get distracted by all the problems. Yep. Yeah. Put your mind on the bigger picture and focus on that. Well, excuse me, but they are intimately and completely and totally connected. Mm-hmm. There is no separation between the relative and the absolute experience, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so important.
Mm-hmm. I love your fire about it.
Well, it really is. I've got goosebumps actually, because it's a big deal. It's a understanding of the teachings and of the opportunity that we have. And one is not separate from the other. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, and it's been so heartening to see, just even in these last months, how many more, at least, Western Dharma teachers have been including more around, like, we can't just be going to our cushions and avoiding the grit of suffering that's calling for immediate inquiry and response and action.
And the practice of meditation can really facilitate a response in such a way that, because let me just back up, when we react, in the way that we normally do, or act from a place of, this kind of urgency, we are often just perpetuating the problem. But when we stop, like I was saying a minute ago, and take a breath and allow all that reactivity to settle down, and allow for, again, something new to come in, that moment of, aha, I see the way, I see the next step. Oh, that's what he meant by that. That's what's calling me. Then the action, the response that comes from that place of knowing, clarity that comes out of this practice, God's way of being, that is something new. That is what is going to take us where we need to go. And we're all needed. Every single one of us is needed, because the problems that we're facing are so huge. Right? It's going to take everything. But it can't come from the same old pattern. It can't come from the same old story. Anyway.
Well, Cynthia, I know we could talk for hours, it seems, but I'd love to. Maybe we could close by inviting you to talk about your upcoming book and the vision behind your book.
Oh, well, I'd love to talk about that, but when you said maybe we can close with, I thought, oh, well, I could read those refuge verses if you'd like.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
Let's do that.
Yeah. Okay, so before I do that, I'll just say that I do have a book coming. It's been a long process. It's taken everything too. But it is a book about all of this, actually. And it is, it's called Summoned by the Earth. And it is in a kind of final process of revision. And I've made the decision to self-publish it, having gone through some various iterations about all of that. So I hope it'll be coming out soon, and I'll let you know when it is. But yeah, it's a little bit out there still. And yeah, there's, the teachings of Tara Gaia, the full moon meditation I do every month with people all around the world. It's a global community now of thousands, actually, who come together to cultivate this practice of bringing healing and protection to the earth, and envisioning the treasure vase mandala and carrying it out, and all of that is now embodied in this kind of Gaia Mandala global healing community that is part of our work of these times, the times of great turning, and coming together for the sake of life. Yeah. So I hope you and everyone else who's hearing this will get involved in your own way, or come into the circle in the ways that I'm offering. So thank you.
And we'll share details in the show notes how people can join.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. It's great to talk to you both, and just have so loved and appreciated getting to know you. So thank you for having me here.
Likewise, Cynthia.
So many thanks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you'd like, I can share these verses.
I think that'd be wonderful.
Sounds perfect.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'll ring the bell, shall I, to just bring us into a bit of another kind of experience. And as I ring the bell, you can just take a breath and another one, and then just open to this expression of refuge.
Mm-hmm.
Perfection of wisdom, mother of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and all beings, nourishing, holding, and healing all, great Mother Earth, precious jewel of the cosmos, to you we bow in gratitude. We take refuge in the earth as our teacher, the one who shows us the way in this life. We take refuge in the earth as an expression of the Dharma, the teachings of interbeing, understanding, and love. We take refuge in the earth as an embodiment of the Sangha, the vast interdependent community of life in balance and harmony. Living within the web of life on earth, we dedicate ourselves to embodying awakened awareness on the path of healing in service to all beings. We dedicate our lives to realizing our oneness with Gaia.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I'm so deeply grateful. I'm thinking of in the beginning when you said, the Lama said, one person practicing deeply can really impact all. And I'm just so deeply impacted by you and your work and your teachings, and so grateful to know you.
Likewise. What was the poem that you sent me, Carl, by Hafiz?
Oh, the line of your heart and my heart are very old friends.
There you go. That's it. How I feel too. So, to be continued.
Be continued. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, it's great if you want to share it with friends or post about it on social media. Also, you could make a donation to support the podcast or find out more information about our classes and offerings at our website, embodimentmatters.com.